Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Setter Tales podcast. I'm Wade Kisner. Today, for our podcast, my partner Thomas obviously is not here tonight, and he's taking care of a mentored youth hunt sponsored by his Pheasants Forever chapter, and that is a great event. And Thomas is really big into getting youth into the field so that we have a future generation to take care of gun dogs and wing shooting in the future. And so he's going to be gone tonight. He'll be back next week. But in his absence, I'm going to fly it solo tonight. And so we're going to do that. It's kind of a special podcast we're going to do. It's a little bit different. We'll probably, there's so much information, we'll probably do it in more than one part, perhaps two. But our guest tonight is Ian Donovan, and Ian is with the United States Army, and he's a canine handler and has done that with some special operations group for several years. I got to meet Ian about 4 years ago at a Veterans Heroes Hunt here in Iowa, and we kind of hit it off, and I just thought he had some great information. We could have talked all night about training dogs and how the military side of training really coincides with a lot of things that we do with our hunting dogs. And so he's been gracious enough to come on and give us a little insight about what the guys on the military side are doing to develop dogs, train dogs, and how that later can translate into some tips that we might pick up from that. So Ian, we'll bring him in now. Hi, Ian. How are you doing?
Great, Wade. Good to see you, man. It's always fun to talk to you.
Yeah, and the first thing I want to say is thank you for your service, Ian. You have been in the Army for many years now, I know, and have a lot of background information and just some really interesting things sometimes that most people don't really realize what you and your fellow handlers do with some of the dogs and the time and the effort that goes into training those dogs. First, I understand that you grew up kind of being a hunting kid, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely, man. I want to say thanks for realizing the service that it takes to the country. It's the greatest honor that I've ever known, ever will know, to be able to serve our country in the capacity that I have, and look forward to continuing that if I can, and if I can't, we'll see how I can still help the country. But a big patriot, and yeah, that came from really my roots growing up in Louisiana. Just a country kid, always obsessed with the pursuit of game animals. It didn't matter if it was a frog or a fish or a duck or a deer or a rabbit, and that obsession kind of gave way to a passion when it came to realizing that I could utilize dogs to assist me with that pursuit of game animals. So yeah, from an early age, I'd have grade beagles that my grandpa would let me take from him and start to train and work, and learning little things like how to make sure they only run a rabbit, no off-game species, run them full circle so that you can get a shot at them, things like that. Quickly gave way and progressed to Labrador retrievers for waterfowl, and then later on upland bird dogs, specifically English pointers, some GSPs here and there. For upland birds, which wasn't very popular in Louisiana, but some of the surrounding states it was. So,
yeah, that's pretty much more like a waterfowl kind of area, isn't it, for the most part down there?
Oh, sure. Yeah, a lot of waterfowl, probably more water out where I was than there was land. So you could get out there and not see another boat, not see another hunter all day. It was a unique experience to grow up in, something we really enjoyed. Got a couple brothers, and we just stayed lost out there, man. But I kind of got away from dogs when I joined the military, and I came into the military with something that's known as an 18 X-ray contract, which gave me the opportunity to go to Special Forces Assessment and Selection. So that happened after boot camp and airborne school, where they teach you how to jump out of planes. And after about 2 years of the course, after I got selected, went through the course, I got stationed at Fort Campbell in Kentucky with 5th Special Forces Group in the U.S. Army. And our area of responsibility was the Middle East. Most of us are Arabic speakers. Got some Russian speakers in there and some French speakers, but primarily Arabic. And I just went to work, man. It's what I joined the Army to do. It was a very deployed unit, very busy. GWAT, or the Global War on Terror. And, ISIS is who I predominantly fought against in the Middle East. And at a certain point in my career, about halfway through, combat started to slow down. The trips slowed down for us. To be honest, what we were doing our job so well that the enemy was just no more. They were just getting hard to find and root out and destroy, which is a good thing. But for us, that's what we joined to do. That's what we work every day to specialize in being very good at. So I started to look at areas within my unit that would keep me geared toward combat. And you always want to be better than you were today, were yesterday. Be better tomorrow than you are today. Just keep building that resume, and that's something that was important to me in my career, to kind of be as lethal as I could, or have as many tools in the toolbox that would allow me to be successful over there. So I went to the kennel, the dog detachment, the NPC detachment, and what drew me there was they don't send dogs on training missions. They don't send handlers and dogs on training missions where we may go and just train another country's special operations units, but not be able to go to combat with them. They only send dogs and handlers to combat scenarios and situations. And so I kind of looked at them initially as a ticket into combat, to keep going and being able to fight. And then very quickly after I arrived there, did I realize the absolute tool that they were, not only to increase unit lethality, but unit survivability as well, which is pretty important to me. Keep my buddies that I deployed with and grown up in the Army with safe. So went there for 2 deployments with 2 different dogs, kind of rose through the ranks at the kennels, and went from the handler position to the green suit trainer position, which means that I was the trainer for the active duty trainer for the guys. And in lieu of not having a civilian trainer, which is contracted for the program, which we didn't have for a while, I kind of stepped up into that role. So I was able to help the guys in the detachment with some of the issues that we all had across the board with the types of dogs that we were getting. And then from there, kind of went to the assistant kennel master position, room for kennel master, and then finished out at the kennel master position. But this NPC program is something that I know that the general public doesn't have a lot of knowledge about. And it's something that's extremely interesting, in my opinion, and I think in conversation with you as well. It's something that I like.
Absolutely. Let me ask a couple questions.
Sure.
I'm sure everybody that's watching is thinking perhaps the same thing. But how many dogs are we talking about that you had there at Fort Campbell that were designated for this kind of mission?
Right. So the dogs we have first are called MPCs. It stands for multi-purpose canine. It's because they do 3 things as opposed to a dual-purpose canine, which does only 2 things. So the 3 things that they do are they find bombs, they find explosive odor, explosive detection dogs. They track personnel, meaning they track footstep to footstep, disturbed earth, and we'll talk a little bit more. And then obviously they apprehend enemy personnel, so they're bite dogs. We train them in patrol work is what it's called, but we train them to bite well, and to be pretty passionate about using their teeth. But on a good day, we should have 12 dogs, but it's pretty hard to keep that many guys down there with how, spread thin we are because of the workload. So, we may have 6 dogs, we may have 7 dogs, 8 dogs. We always try to keep a few spares just in case, a dog team goes down overseas, we can backfill them pretty quickly. And those spares are a little different.
So while you're training with the group at Fort Campbell, then you have some of your teams that are deployed during that period of time. They're overseas somewhere.
Oh yeah,
on assignment. Okay.
Right. So we'll always have guys that are out of the door. We kind of call it. They're overseas, and we're constantly working to backfill the next guys that have to go. So just a constant rotation of being prepared and increasing your level of preparedness pretty much every day, and then a lot of nights too, because a lot of the work we do over there is during hours of darkness because we have night vision and some of the other guys don't. So it stacks odds in your favor. But that throws a whole wrench in the operation when it comes to understanding your dog, being able to read your dog. You go from big situational awareness to looking through kind of a toilet paper tube, 2 of them for us at night to be able to see your dog. So, situational awareness is huge, and being able to understand your dog's changes of behavior, pretty big as well.
So we got into talking about the dog aspect of it from the time you're selecting a dog, and that so you're the one that would actually go and say we need 2 or 3 new dogs in the kennel. You're the person that goes and tries to determine which dogs are going to fit for
Correct.
your needs, correct?
Yeah, so it works is in the kennel master position. You know the guys that are there, that their time's almost up. You know that when you need new guys, you know when the dogs' times are almost up. You know when you need to backfill dogs as well. So yeah, it's my job to understand my men first and foremost, the guys that work for me, understand their strengths and weaknesses, their personalities, and then I go and select a dog that will fit with them. And that knowledge comes from being a handler for so long, a trainer, and understanding people and dogs, which is kind of something you need to understand both aspects of. But yeah, when I need a dog, we source our dogs through a contracting company. They get their dogs from Europe, so Slovakia, Germany, Hungary, Holland. Almost all of our dogs come from Europe, and that's just because the bloodlines are so pure there. They're not they're not breeding out certain drives that we like to see, where some American breeders kind of are. These American breeders are breeding out prey drive, hunt drive, intensity, high energy, aggression, because that's not something they want waiting for them when they get home from 10 hours in their appointment. Right? So we get all of our dogs from Europe, and once we do that, they run a selection process for the kennel masters from each group, and some of the other military units that go to the same place. And we select a dog based off of what our needs are. Um, and each operational environment's a little different. Ours is the Middle East, so above and beyond everything else, you'll hear me say a few things in this interview, uh, like drives and instincts, hunt drive, prey drive. We'll explain kind of what that is, but hunt drive for me supersedes all else. Prey drive is pretty easy to create in a dog. Most of these dogs have pretty high prey drive, which is anything that moves in their environment catches their attention. And the majority of them want to go put their mouth on it. But hunt drive is the ability to know, is in your eyes and your ears, just like we do, to hunt out um, a source of interest. That could be for the dogs. We try to make that either enemy personnel or explosive odor, and that's paramount to all else. And a dog with a high hunt drive, it doesn't matter if it's 120 degrees in the desert, he's going to hunt. His reward is to hunt. That's what makes him tick. Whereas some dogs with high prey drive, you kind of have to get them back in the game if they get a little bored, pulling a toy out, or piquing their interest again. But yeah, we train these dogs. We basically manipulate them to do what we want them to do by making them think it's the most fun thing on earth to do, so that they'll run through a brick wall, for a tennis ball. But we'll get these dogs normally around a year and a half, sometimes 2 years old, from Europe, and when we get them, they're pretty much a blank slate for the most part. Those are the dogs that I like to select, meaning they're very sound physically and for the most part emotionally and mentally. Some dogs have a little screw loose, but we can weed those guys out in selection. We need a dog that's pretty confident. Alpha males are great. We need a dog that's got high hunt drive, decent prey drive, high possessive drive. He wants to possess things, but he's not so crazy about it that he won't give it up. And that's things that we can work with. But after selecting the dog, our dog and handler will go through an 8-week course with that contractor, and then he'll come back to us for what we call an advanced course. We run him through certain scenarios. When he graduates that course, the dog is going to be able to find explosive odor and alert on it, either lay down or sit down. Some alert that we ask the dog, we teach the dog to give us. He's going to be able to track people, and he's going to be able to use his mouth to apprehend people, to bite, use really solid control work. When we get the dog, we send, ensure that he's ready for deployment. And then that dog and that handler will be together for the next 2.5 to 3 years, deploying periodically throughout that time, based on the operation tempo that the unit's experiencing. So it takes a certain person to do the job well, because you've got to not only keep up with your own personal skills as a soldier, shoot, move, and communicate, but you're also responsible for the success of a dog now, and his training and his well-being and his health and everything else. So it's a full-time job, but it's a lot of fun, and pretty rewarding because you see every day the fruits of your labor. The dog that you're training and working with on a daily basis.
What typically is the I guess the period of time from that time you start training that dog, what kind is their work level as far as how many years or how long does it matter how many times that dog's been in combat? Do they just age out at some point where they're not physically able to do the task?
Right. Well, that's all dog dependent, really, just like people. Some of them physically can put up with a little more than others can just because of the way they're built. Some of them mentally can put up with a little more than others can just because of the way that they're wired. We will always test the dog prior to deployment, well before deployment, to see if he's up to the task mentally and physically. And if he's not, then that's when we start understanding he's not going to go on this next trip. We're going to have a guy fill in for him. But we know that well in advance. We have a veterinary staff on site that helps us with the physical side of things, the health side of things. And then the trainer really, we're constantly putting these dogs in very high stress environments. And it takes a strong handler and a strong dog to make it through that. But typically 2 years, two and a half years, the dog will last the stint of that handler. Some dogs go home with that handler afterwards, when they're done. And some of those dogs, like the second dog that I worked, I was his second handler. Phenomenal dog, really, really strong dog, both mentally and physically. Very high tolerance for pain, but we have to understand that too, because we don't want these dogs to cripple themselves, because they will. They'll just continue to drive through it. Mentally, he's a great dog as well. These dogs don't have cognitive reasoning skills like humans do. So big explosions, gunfights, fights that they get into physically with enemy personnel. It's not stuff that they can understand. So some of these dogs have some issues, and we have to kind of take them out of the rotation. And we can get them help sometimes. Sometimes it's just time for them to retire. So it's all dog specific and really operation specific. How much abuse has this dog taken? Whether it's jumping out of helicopters, riding in the back of Humvees, side-by-sides, or razors as we call them. It takes a toll on a dog's joints. I can see a ditch that's coming up and I can brace myself for impact, and the dog just eats it. We try to help them through that as much as possible, but they take a beating. And so, about 2.5 years, 3 years, and we'll let that handler decide if he would like to take the dog home at the end of the dog's working life. And most of the time, that's exactly what happens.
Yeah. Now, you were deployed a few times before you got involved with the canines on the handling side, correct?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm assuming that there was a canine and a handler embedded probably in some of those units that you were with at that time.
Yeah. So my first interaction was actually with an NPC overseas, but I was not his handler.
But what was the general attitude of you and the other personnel, as far as if you knew you were going someplace or taking on a mission, but you had that canine along as part of the group? Was that something that I guess gave you a little bit more, not a comfort level, but at least you felt that dog increased some of the opportunity to find those explosives or find the enemy personnel, that kind of thing?
Sure, yeah. I mean, most of the guys and we're trying to integrate more with teams so that they have an understanding of what the dog's capable of. But in country, the handler did a really good job of explaining to us what he was capable of and what we could expect from him and his dog, which is something that we carry on every trip we go on. But absolutely, I mean, not only a morale booster, right? Because we all have dogs at home, so you're over there in an unfamiliar place, and people aren't very nice to you pretty much all the time, and having a dog there, it's pretty nice. We just had to be careful not to treat them in. You can kind of turn them into a pet if you're not careful, right?
Yes.
The dog thinks it's more fun to just hang out with you back at the fob or wherever you are, as opposed to going out on missions. So we integrated him as a member of the team, and that's what he knew. It's called assaulter neutralization, where we have to make sure he understands who the assaulters are in the group, who the good guys are, because we're in the dark in high stress environments. The dog's got to be able to decipher and tell the difference between one of the good guys and one of the bad guys. And a lot of times it's it's because he's so familiar with the team that he's attached to that he understands who people are.
So is that all through odor for
A
the
lot
most
of it's
part?
by odor, right? We eat different than the guys we're chasing. We smell different than they smell. We're different size. We're acting a little different. The chemicals coming out of our body, as opposed to the chemicals coming out of a guy who we're chasing's body, is a little different. So dogs pick up on all of that. And the way that we create that scenario in training is just try and mimic it as best as we can. Take a dog who's scared of dogs and put him in the suit, or make the dog chase him. Someone who's legitimately terrified of a dog, because overseas that's what they are. But it gives you a peace of mind to know that there's a dog team in front of you, because we're pretty good at being better than them at shooting, at each other, or fighting hand to hand or gun to gun. But when it comes to bombs, man, that's a great equalizer. We don't know where they're and it'll humble you pretty quick if you've ever been in an explosion or seen the power that these explosives create and some of the damage they do to the human body. So yeah, there's never been a guy that I've been in front of that said, "I'll go in front of the dog team,"
I bet not.
Unless it's DOD, because they're also some phenomenal guys to work with, but they even understand. Listen, that dog's here, unfortunately, to die for us, so that we don't have to. If that's the case, I'll lose a dog all day over a human being. That's why they're there. So, yeah, a big peace of mind, and then it does a lot for different missions too. If we need to get a guy but not kill a guy, if it's capture and not kill mission, then it'd be really beneficial to get a dog in there to get that guy out, as opposed to us going in there. A certain level of insulation, just like police officers understand.
I think I met with that dog that you had mentioned before. I think you brought that dog to Iowa with you on one occasion, pretty intense guy.
Yeah, I mean, he'll be intense until the day he dies. It's just the way he's wired. Now he's at the house with me, and he's still super intense. We live out in the country, and people shoot guns all the time. He runs straight to gunfire. With his hackles up, he understands it's a fight, and because of training, because of creating that scenario for him, which is a fun scenario to be in. He gets to go fight. He gets to win in the majority of the time in training, right? So he associates that type of environment with fun, right? So
I imagine you sleep pretty good at night knowing that he's in the house.
Yeah, he was good to me overseas. He's good to me here.
He's incredible. Like I said, some of the demonstrations that you did with it, he's incredible. And having been in law enforcement like I was for 30 some years, I had an opportunity to interact with a lot of law enforcement canine handlers, and it was somewhat a similar thing when you went to get a fugitive or something on a fugitive apprehension or something, and you had a canine team there. You kind of that, and they, the dog went into that building first. It was kind of one of those things that, if this guy's in there hidden someplace, we got an option now, and we have an advantage with this dog. However, in talking with you, those probably aren't the super aggressive dogs that end up in a unit like yours. They're a little more, because you're dealing with the public in a public scenario a lot. They probably want that little more moderate kind of dog personality, as opposed to the.
Yes and no. I mean, it's my hat's off to law enforcement, hands down. They have, in my opinion, a more difficult job than we do, because when we go into an area, there are no American citizens there, right? So we get to do things a little differently. Not that we don't try to we go after the guy we're going after, but we have a little more leeway than those guys do, and our dogs have the same thing, right? So we're going to tell the people that a dog's coming out, but if they don't choose to get out of the way, then the dog he's an equal opportunity biter. He'll bite anybody who's in front of him, and a lot of these bad guys know that, so they have human shields, and that's something we have to train our way through, creating a situation where the dog can determine who the guy is we need, whether that be directing him with lasers or voice commands, or it's really huge for these dogs to pick up on who who the guy is, and that's difficult if he's not being aggressive, right? We teach a lot of what we call dead prey bites, where the guy will be acting like he's already dead on an objective, so that we pass him and then shoot us in the back. So, like I said, the dog, if allowed to, will put his teeth on whatever we ask him to, whether it be dead or alive. Now, dead prey bites are difficult sometimes to teach because the dog gets a reaction out of who he's biting, and that fuels his bite. It makes it more fun for him. But through training and proper aid placement and people that are in the suit, we can teach that dog to bite anything or anybody that we want him to. But yeah, it's it's a huge advantage that we have. I think people think the dog's teeth are the biggest advantage, but his nose for us is always the biggest advantage.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I've got a couple guns on me that can do worse than his teeth can do, right? But his nose and his ability to tell us where people are, where explosives are very huge. And those are two different responses from the dog that we teach, right? Because they can't be the same. I need to know if there's a man behind that door or a bomb behind the door, right? So little things like that, and the ways that we train it are very important for our dogs. But yeah, the difference between our dogs and law enforcement, we know a dog that law enforcement probably wouldn't use, and that's kind of why we use different breeds. A lot of law enforcement will use shepherds, German shepherds. We use Belgian Malinois and Dutch shepherds predominantly. Not that police aren't, but you can find those dogs with different drives than the ones that we have. But we need the dog to be extremely, extremely energetic and devoted to what he's doing, because the environment that our dogs are working in is a little harsher than what law enforcement is working in. That dog can go in the back of a cop car in the AC for, half the shift or 3/4 of the shift and get pulled out for 30 minutes, where our dogs are almost working on the opposite ratios. They're out and working the entire time, getting put up in no AC, right? And dogs will acclimate to whatever environment you expose them to properly. But yeah, they're a little different dogs as the law enforcement side and the military side.
Let's talk a little bit about, okay, you get that, you've selected that 2-year-old dog that's kind of the blank slate, as you mentioned, and you bring them into the kennel, and then what do you start looking for, and what kind of behavioral things and training things do you start to do at that point?
Yeah. So one thing that we do above and beyond anything else is called environmental training, right? So exposing the dogs to as many different things in his environment as you can in a positive way. It's no different from your gun dogs, exposing them to truck rides, exposing them to boat rides, exposing them to different surfaces, different types of cover in the field. A briar bush is a little different from a honeysuckle vine with no briars on it, right? So that dog's going to start to understand the difference between the two, but he's got to be able to jump into both, pieces of cover. So environmental training is huge. Positive exposure to things in his environment that's new to him are very big, and we utilize that he's obsessed with, right? Most of the time a ball of some sort, to create a positive first impression or first exposure to anything in his environment that's new to him. Heights, tunnels. So get him up high, get him down low, get him in the dark, get him on different objects, you see a dog that's never been inside of a building, right? So dogs grip with their nails for the most part outside in grass, and they try to do that inside on a slick floor, and they just skate the whole time. They need to understand to use the pads of their feet indoors, and that's something that it sounds crazy, but you've got to teach these dogs who've never seen that type of thing. And then they shut their brain off whenever your decoy shows up, and they just go back to what they know. It's something called the law of primacy, and you'll hear me kind of say that throughout this episode and hopefully the following. But what a dog learns first is what he's going to understand. I equate it to muscle memory in human beings, right? So if that dog, understood that when walking on a surface, he uses his nails to grip, when, everything hits the fan and he's highly stressed out, that's what he's going to go back to, regardless of how much we've tried to train him. But we're still going to try to work on that dog environmentally and expose him as many different environmental factors as possible so that nothing surprises him. He's comfortable in every environment, every situation we can put him in. On top of the water, underwater, flying. I mean, things that normal dogs would never be exposed to. Dogs don't have great depth perception, so rappelling, climbing with a dog attached to you, things like that. They don't understand if they jump out of a helicopter or off of a roof, they're going to kill themselves. So it's something that we have to be cognizant of. But they also need to understand rotor wash from a helicopter won't kill them. It's not something that'll hurt them. Very, very strange for a dog. All these noises, these differences in light, surfaces, smell, uh, differences in temperature, everything. So that we try to expose them to as much of that as we can in a positive way. And then we very quickly, as we're doing that, expose them to odor as well. We want this, for us, IEDs have been a really big part of what we've been tasked to defeat overseas with our dogs. So his obedience to odor, that's another thing you'll hear me say, both with these dogs and with the gun dog, is paramount. I spend a little more with these bomb dogs than with gun dogs. And what I mean by that is if we're walking from point A to point B, and I'm not asking the dog to search for odor at this point, but he encounters explosive odor, he needs to respond to that odor, regardless of whether or not I've told him to walk next to me or in front of me or in between my legs or whatever it may be. He needs to ignore me at that point and be more obedient to explosive odor than he is to me. That's huge for us. So we do a lot of that with our dogs and show them that they can blow us off at any point in time if it's for explosive odor, if it's for man odor, right? If we're walking through a building and there's a person behind the door, I want that dog to stop what he's doing and show me there's a person back there. I may do something with it, I may not, but I need for him to understand that every single time he encounters something like that, he needs to show it to me, right? So that's something we start working on right off the gate, right when they get to the unit, and most of it is with explosive odor. So a ton of different scenarios as well. More of the combat scenarios that we found ourselves in is what we expose the dogs to as far as finding bombs. We need the dog in a gunfight, right? The dog's not going to understand when bullets are flying by him that it's dangerous for him. So he's going to go out there, he's going to find the bomb. He needs to understand that gunfire is nothing. He needs to be neutral to it. So we do a lot of training with gunfire around us when it comes to finding bombs. One of the things that the guys that we're after over there understand that we do is when we receive fire, we're going to run to some sort of cover and concealment and return fire. Well, they lace those areas with IEDs when they're, they can get us in an area that there are only a few pieces of things to hide behind. So I'm the first guy there with the dog to make sure that we're not going to get blown up, right? So little things like that. The dog needs to understand obedience to odor is paramount above all else. And the dog in the field needs to learn the same thing. There's a huge correlation between that I teach to my gun dogs as well, my hunting dogs. Obedience to odor is everything. If I'm recalling that dog because I'm done hunting or because I think that this field has been hunted enough, I need him to understand that if there's a bird that he comes into contact with on that recall, he stops and he tells me there's a bird there, right? Whether it be a down bird from another hunt or a bird that we're after, right? We don't want to waste anything in the field, but we also need his obedience to odor to be paramount, and that's huge. So that's the first thing we really start with. Their environmental training, exposing to all these different platforms that he's going to be, utilizing to infill and exfil, whether it be vehicle, boat, aircraft of different sorts. And then ascend, descend, a lot of climbing with the dog, a lot of rappelling with the dog, a lot of things that the regular dog would never get exposed to. But that's why we select the dogs that we do that are really high drive. And that kind of pushes them through where a lot of these other dogs would fail.
And I'm assuming that all through the process, you're doing this daily evaluation of each dog, their strengths, their weaknesses, and if a dog is, say, doesn't like to be above the ground, so to speak, then that dog's probably going to get more time in that aspect of training than others. A lot like human athletes, if you will. If you're a decathlete and you have an event that's a little weaker than your others, that's the one you're probably spending more time working on. And,
100%. Yeah, I mean, I don't like to run. I never have and never will. I had to work on it. You got to be good at everything. Dogs are no different, right? So there are different training isms that we can use. Most of these dogs will run to get their toy no matter what. So we utilize that toy a lot. It's a bargaining chip during training.
So tell us a little bit of how that works. How do you introduce that toy to build that dog wanting to go through a brick wall to get that toy? I mean, I've
Yeah.
seen the law enforcement dogs, and I've been amazed at that. But just to get to grab that tennis ball, they'll do about it. Do anything. So, but
Yeah.
how do you introduce that? What's the first thing you do when that
That's
new dog comes in?
that's by design, and most of our dogs have that once we get them. But
Okay.
I've trained puppies, that were blank slates, and I really enjoy doing it. And what I do with it is a lot of times you can build a little bit of frustration in a young dog. Make it fun for them, make it fun for them, make it expose them to it properly, give it to him in very short increments, and every time he gets it, it's a great time. Whether it's a piece of leather that his teeth can't pierce, so he's got to understand that bite pressure is very important from a very young age, right? So I'll give him a little leather apron or a little strip of leather, and he's biting on it. It's fun. While it's in his mouth, it comes alive, man. I'm jerking on it, I'm tugging on it, just like a rabbit. If there's a little squeaky toy in it, sometimes even better. Um, it kicks into their DNA what's already there, right? The desire to go and put their mouth on a source of food, potentially that rabbit, right? It's going to wiggle and squeak. It's going to be fun for them. We do the same thing with young puppies, and then we take it away from them and we pick them up and we start teaching them that every time they come out, they need to start looking forward to that object. It's the only thing in their universe, right? And that's what happens in Europe a lot of times. They're a year and a half year old dog or a 2-year-old dog that's only got toy drive and toy possession, and that's all they put into them. Every time they come out, that's what they're doing. They're playing with this toy. It's their whole world. It's their whole world. When they go back in, it goes away. So they come out looking forward to that thing and that thing only. And that does a lot for us. It allows us to have a bargaining chip in training. And then when we get the dogs, we do certain things to teach him how to find explosive odor. We pair it with that toy, right? So the way we do it is it's called the box method. And we have a box that the dog's nose can fit in. And we'll tease him up. We'll have a guy holding him. We'll tease him up with a tennis ball or whatever his toy is. We'll show him, he's 3 feet away. We'll show him that it disappears in this box. He runs up, shoves his nose in it, and we pop it up and he gets it. Okay. So we do that until the dog understands that go to this box and your toy will appear. And then we start putting explosive odor in the box with the tennis ball, with the toy. So he shoves his nose in there to get his ball, and he's getting all of this explosive odor as well. It doesn't mean anything to him at first, but subconsciously, his brain is starting to learn that tennis ball or my toy, explosive odor, it's as good a thing as my toy, right? And then we start slowly removing the ball. And anytime he goes and smells that explosive odor, we give him the toy. We make the toy appear. So he's starting to understand, you're kind of bridging that gap that explosive odor means my toy. And then we start, and we use a stew theory, which just means that every single explosive odor the dog can encounter, we put in that box for him. Dogs smell at a much better rate than we do. So stew theory is pretty simple. We smell a stew. Dog would smell every different ingredient in that stew. That's the same exact thing we do with explosive odor. So then we start, one box has got the bomb in or the explosive odor. Now there's 2 boxes. Now the dog has got to go to each box, whatever box he goes to. And at this time, we've taught him to sit at the box when he smells explosive odor to get his ball. Now it's a guessing game, but it's not a guessing game because he's using his nose, right? So that's kind of, and then we add more boxes, and he goes and he smells all the boxes. When he encounters explosive odor, he cannot go past it, right? He can't just go and see if there's any more explosive odor in any box. When he hits that odor, he slams his butt on the ground. It's very important. And then a ball appears, right? Or his toy appears. So it's a fun thing. And we wouldn't be able to do that if the dog didn't have high ball drive or high toy drive or high possession. Once he gets that ball or that toy, he wants to hold on to it. And then we teach him that, hey, man, it's okay to give me the ball because now the game starts again. And you'll notice the dogs with high hunt drive will get the ball and sometimes spit it and then look at the game again because their driving factor is to hunt. It's not the final. Right? Most dogs with high prey drive or high possession want that toy. But a guy with high hunt drive, a dog with high hunt drive that's going to be more of a reward sometimes than the toy at the end of it. And that's what I really enjoy, and that's what I look for, both in these dogs as well as dogs in the field that I hunt with.
What's the length of time in that process? I mean, are you talking weeks, months?
Well,
What
again, every
typically?
dog's a little different.
Okay.
Sometimes I can do a dog in 3 or 4 days and have them guessing between 4 boxes or finding the bomb in 4 boxes. And then we change up, are the boxes all in a line? Are they square? Are they in a triangle? We take a box out, whatever it may be. So different. At this time, too, we're also teaching the dog how to enter a room, kind of pattern around the room, kind of maybe searching from left to right, right to left, whatever it is we may want to do. But that amount of time is kind of dependent on the dog and how good you are as a trainer. Again, law of primacy states that what the dog learns first sticks, right? So you do things right, and I tell people this all the time. Before you even get a dog, I want you to understand exactly what you want each command to look like. When you say sit, what do you mean exactly when you say that command? When you say come, does it mean come in the general vicinity of me, or come and sit right in front of me and look at me and give me your undivided attention? Because that's my definition of come with my dog. Sit or heel would be right next to my left-hand side with his head next to my knee. It's very important for the waterfowl dogs and the field trial dogs we work with. It allows a few things. It allows me to line them up when sending them out. But you've got to understand exactly what you want from the get-go. And the first time you expose that dog to that, that's what you need to accept at the end of the iteration. So he only gets paid for doing exactly what you want him to do. So yeah, the law of primacy, and that's something, I'm not making these terms up at all. These are things that I've learned from great trainers and great handlers. Jacob Robinson was a trainer for us at work, and is still a personal friend of mine, and I come to him with dog issues all the time. Pat Nolan is the best dog handler and trainer that I'll ever know and meet. A big lab guy. He trains upland bird dogs. He's an animal behavioralist, and he's taught me that understanding animal behavior is more important than considering yourself a trainer. You need to be a behavioralist, because once you understand what makes them tick, now you can start training to do what you like them to do. But yeah, that's kind of the timeline is up to the dog and up to the trainer. But we can get it done in about 3 days with some really slick dogs.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
I figured it'd take longer than that.
Sometimes it does. Sometimes if you make mistakes in those first few days, it'll take you a few weeks or a few months. One of the big things we do, and some of the things we see from Europe, are dogs that are trained in different sports, Schutzhund or French ring. Some dogs are article guard. They've been taught to guard articles. So a box in a room, and that's the only thing he sees in that room, he may spin around and revert to what he's known first, right? The law of primacy, what he's learned is that when he guards this thing, he gets rewarded. Well, I can't go up there and have a dog take my face off next to this article, because he gets graded on how close he allows people to get to the article that he's guarding, right? So again, law of primacy is a really big thing in training. And if you make those mistakes in the beginning, or you don't recognize that that's what you see, because they might have washed out of that in Europe, they might not have been great at it, but they still know it and understand it. And he may be just bad enough at it to trick you into thinking you can get close enough to it, and then you're nuked, right? So you've got to be able to read the dog. Changes of behavior are huge. That's another phrase you'll hear me say. It's huge in the bomb dog world, whether he's finding a bomb or finding a man. Being able to see those little things that he's telling you with his body. He's panting, right? It's hot. He passed this certain area and closed his mouth to use just his nose, right? That's a productive area. He understands that's a productive area because we've taught him that that's a productive area through aid placement. Maybe the bottom of a door, the crack in the bottom of a door. Well, that's his only snapshot into the room, odor-wise, right? He can tell me what's on the other side of that door by smelling the crack and the air that's coming out from underneath the door. He understands that's a productive area in a wall that he comes to. Not many other dogs would understand that, but productive areas are huge, and we need to teach the dog to understand them and see them, because there's times that I can't pay attention to everything he's doing because there's people out there trying to shoot me still. So I need him to have a level of confidence and a level of, I need him to be able to do things on his own, right? In lieu of me giving him commands. So I'll tell him to go and search, and I'll try to keep an eye on him. And if he misses an area that I think is a productive area, I'll put him back in that area and put him to work. Same thing that we do in the field with our dogs, right? I need my dog to understand what a productive area is in the field. Is this bird going to be out in the middle of this scalped field that's been burned? No, probably not. Is it going to be in this cover here? Probably so. Is it easier for him to run around in that open field and have fun? Yeah. But is it more fun for him to find a bird and get in this cover and work for it? That's what we're trying to manipulate the dog into understanding. And we can do that through aid placement with birds as well in the field. The correlation is huge between aid placement in the bomb world and in the bird dog world. But it's pretty interesting. It's something, we need a dog to be independent, but we need him to be a team player at the same time. So it's a lot of things that we're asking of all these dogs, really, on both sides of the coin. Independence is huge, but listening to me when I ask you to is also big. But understanding I'm not always going to step in to give you the answer to a problem. I need you to problem solve. It's pretty big because you don't want to build a dog who's completely dependent on the handler. And if you solve every problem for him, you're going to create that in a dog. And that's the last thing you need.
And you also told me that your dogs are not handler specific. I mean, they're trained to basically work for whoever is in the unit that's giving them some kind of search command or whatever, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There'll be times that I may eat a bullet and not be able to continue. That dog's got to continue because the mission doesn't stop because one guy's down. The mission doesn't stop for a lot of reasons a lot of times. So yeah, he's got to be able to take guidance from others, and a lot of that comes into how well have we integrated him with that group of guys? How well have we integrated those group of guys with that dog? How many guys are scared of dogs? How many guys are going to flinch at that dog when he comes around the corner at night? Or how many guys are going to trust that he understands not to bite you because we've kind of exposed him to that during training, which is the right answer. The wrong answer is not to expose guys to that. So, the harder you train, and the harder there's a saying for us in our world, the more you sweat in training, the less you bleed in combat. You got to put the hours in, with this dog. And you'll see the benefits as a result of it. But yeah, absolutely. I'll always designate an alternate handler on the group with the group of guys that I'm deployed with, and if I go down, he takes the dog and continues on. But in a house too, if we're doing CQB or close quarter battle, again, the dog's in there to fight with us, and we're going to get separated a lot of times. He needs to take direction from guys. One key that most of these experienced dogs start looking for is where's the barrel pointed. That's always a good indication of where the bad guy is that I get to go bite. Right? And then we start teaching them different things about that. I want them to bite them high in the thigh. I want them to leg bite so that I can still shoot over top of them if necessary. So a lot of things we expect from these dogs to know, but it's all, again, through aid placement and training. If I want a dog to leg bite, I'll only expose legs to him for a while in that scenario, in that CQB environment. And you can start teaching these dogs at CQB, we're just going to bite in a building. Now, a dog will bite whatever's available for him to bite. And in a high-stress environment, I'm not going to say he won't go high on a guy, because he will. But then, we do a lot of practicing when it comes to marksmanship.
You'd rather have him waist high or below for the most part?
Kind of the similarity between having a dog steady to wing or steady to wing and shot.
Right.
A dog that's steady to wing and shot's not going to jump up on that client of yours who's never hunted before, sees that bird flush, and doesn't understand it's a low-flying bird and shoots your dog as a result of it. The fog of war is real overseas. As much as we practice not shooting a dog, that dog jumps up at the last second to bite a guy, and we're already engaged in combat with him. That dog could also get hit. So little things like that, that's another correlation in training between some of the things that we're asking and how we get there. Training a dog to be steady to wing and shot, or training a dog to just bite legs in a CQB environment when that's an option for them. Those are big things. And those are things for a trainer to understand. It also helps to have the experience that I did going into this stuff, because a civilian trainer working for us is kind of at a loss when it comes to tactics and exposure to things like that, and experience, fighting guys overseas. He doesn't have it, but since I did, I was, and I'm lucky to have had it going over there. I was able to train the dogs kind of the way they needed to be trained because of the experiences that I had. So it worked out really well for me and really well for the dogs that I got to work with. I'm thankful for all those experiences because they led to some success for us over there.
Now, the military really first kind of started using dogs as a tool, as an asset, like during Vietnam. Wasn't that kind of the first time they really got dogs kind of embedded with units? And for
Yeah,
the most,
yeah, and a lot of those.
and for the most part, a lot of those dogs were like perimeter security when they were out in
Yeah,
the jungle and that kind of thing. Now, do your dogs do something similar if you're down in a certain area for overnight or whatever? Is that dog kind of doing sentry kind of duty? Or are they trained to do that also, or is that?
well, we train the dogs to never shut it off, and what I mean by that is I like to pique a dog's interest as a trainer. Anytime guys are just standing around with their dog talking to another guy, I may sneak behind a vehicle and peek at that dog and just show him little pieces of me, something that piques his interest. He's always got to be aware of his surroundings. And when we teach that the right way, he just sees me acting like a weirdo over there. Well, at a certain point, the guys, a lot of the handlers don't know it, and I don't want them to know it. I want them to be ignorant of where I am in their environment, or that I'm even doing any of this. But I need the dog to be aware of everything at all times. So when he sees me acting weird, the second that I pique his interest, I'll pull the sleeve out, and he understands he gets a bite at that point. So he comes running and bites me with the handler not even knowing what's going on. So we teach that in the dogs. We teach them to constantly be aware of their surroundings at all times, because at any point in time, you can go have a good time if you're them. And that's carried over overseas quite a bit, because that training came because we needed dogs, obviously, to be aware of their surroundings. There were guys that we worked with and were embedded with and trained and slept with, ate with, trained with, everything that ended up shooting us, because they were sleeper, agents for whatever faction we were going after, and they passed all the tests that the partner force had given, and slipped under the radar. So those situations created a need for a dog to be eternally vigilant for us, because unfortunately we're not at all times. Where if I'm engaged in a conversation, it takes me a little bit of it takes me out of the game a little. I've got to focus on that. Well, that dog's job 100% of the time is to watch my back. So even now with the dog I have at my house, when I'm standing there with him, he's constantly looking where my back is pointed. And we teach that. I don't need you in front of me looking the same way I'm looking. I need you looking behind me because I don't have eyes back there. We teach that through egg placement, teach that a ton of different ways. But those are little things that I was able to kind of bring to the program and teach the dogs that are huge. And Nate Tennant, a trainer that he was a handler for 5th Group, and then he went on and trained. Phenomenal trainer, great guy. He taught me that. Teach you to always pique those dogs' interest, man. At any point in time, they can go get a bite if they're doing the right things. So that's what we teach them.
That's great. I think obviously we've spent a great amount of time kind of talking about what you guys do and what you expect of your military dogs, and it's just I could go on for another hour just about that, and I think our viewers and listeners are going to find the same thing. We just have no clue, what these dogs are, what their abilities are, and I'm amazed that I guess what they bring to the whole fight, in the sense that how big an asset they really are. You see dogs and you hear stories about dogs that are with units like yours, but until you drill down and really find out how did that dog get built to do those kinds of things, there's the amazing part. And I give you guys all the credit in the world that you're able to put the time and effort and patience and to vet those dogs and get them to that point where they're able to successfully go on those missions like they do.
Yeah.
So I think what we'd like to do is we'll take a break here, and when we come back for part 2, if it's all right with you, Ian, I think we'll then kind of make that transition a little bit into some hunting dog aspects and how a lot of the things that you've put in practice every day with the military dogs is something that we could utilize also in the training and handling of our hunting dogs on a daily basis. I obviously have dogs that we do guided hunts with and that type of thing. And so you're right, reading those dogs and knowing when they're on bird scent and having a dog that knows to hunt to cover, that you don't just have to continue to redirect is a valuable thing, and it makes you successful in the field. And so maybe we can discuss some of those things when we come back for part 2.
Sure. Yeah, I enjoy it, man. There are a ton of correlations between the two types of dogs, and the dog in the field is as important to me when I get home as the dog that got me home. And some training one a little better than the other is a little more important to me. One keeps me alive and keeps me coming back to train the other one and have fun. So a lot of correlations that I'd love to talk to.
All right. We'll shut it down at this point for part 1, and everybody make sure that you check out part 2, where we're going to talk about more of the gun dog training and aspects of that Ian has done. So join us for part 2 of Ian Donovan's interview.